The Walker's shortbread tin had been sitting behind the Christmas ornament trunk for 34 years. Dust covered the tartan pattern on the lid. Scotch tape, yellowed and brittle, wound around it 3 times. Someone had written a date in black marker, 14.06.1990. Liam Lavington held the tin in both hands. The metal was cold despite the September heat trapped in the attic. Through the grimy window behind him, Milford looked exactly as it always had: small, quiet, forgettable. The kind of Ontario town where nothing ever happened, except once. Before we begin the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. We're really curious where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a rating. He pulled at the tape. It cracked and fell away in strips. Inside, folded carefully, lay a dress. Blue fabric with sequins that still caught the dusty light. Beside it, a gold locket on a broken chain. The engraving read VL in cursive script. Veronica Lavington had been wearing both items the last time anyone saw her alive. The official story said she ran away, took nothing with her but the clothes on her back and dreams of escape. That's what the police concluded in 1990. That's what the town believed for 3 decades. That's what Liam himself had accepted, somewhere between his 11th birthday and his 45th. But if Veronica ran away, why was her prom dress in their mother's attic? The questions sat in the room like a third presence. Liam set the tin down on the floor, careful not to disturb the contents further. His architect's hands, calloused from job sites, marked with old cuts, trembled slightly. He twisted his wedding ring, force of habit, even 2 years after the divorce. Beneath the dress lay a piece of paper, lined notebook paper, the kind they used in high school. Blue lines, 3 holes punched on the left side. The handwriting was unmistakable, loops and careful letters, exactly like the birthday cards Veronica used to make for him when he was small. "Forgive me, I can't live after what they did. Brian, Tyler, and Joel. Mom, Dad, don't blame yourselves. I just want this to end." Liam read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. A second piece of paper lay underneath. Different handwriting. His father's cramped teacher's script. "Lord, forgive us. We cannot let this be known. For her memory." The attic suddenly felt airless. Liam stood up too fast, hit his head on a low beam. The pain was sharp and immediate, and almost welcome. Something concrete. Something that made sense. His phone had no signal up here. It never did. He'd have to go downstairs to make the call. But to who? The police? A lawyer? He didn't know the protocol for finding evidence that your parents covered up your sister's death. Covered up. The words felt too clinical.
His parents, Robert and Margaret Lavington, fixtures of Milford society, churchgoers, respected citizens, had hidden the truth about their daughter's disappearance for 34 years. Liam picked up the locket. The clasp was broken. Veronica used to wear it every day, had a habit of touching it when she was nervous, running her thumb over the engraving. He remembered that. Remembered her doing it the morning of her prom, standing in the kitchen in her bathroom, drinking orange juice, already anxious about the night ahead. That was June 14th, 1990, the last morning he saw his sister. He'd been 11 years old enough to remember, too young to understand. The police came the next day. Constable Harriet Drury, young then, probably not much older than Veronica, asked him questions in the living room while his parents talked to other officers in the kitchen. Did Veronica seem upset? Had she mentioned running away? Did she have a boyfriend?
Liam remembered answering carefully, trying to be helpful. Veronica had seemed fine, he said. Normal. Maybe a little nervous about prom, but normal nervous, not bad nervous. She had a boyfriend. Had, past tense, because Derek Holloway had broken up with her a month before. But she said she didn't care, said she was better off without him. The police wrote everything down. They searched Veronica's room. They talked to her friends, her teachers, everyone at the prom. They found one of her shoes, silver, high-heeled, in bushes 200 meters from the school. They treated the case as a runaway. Smart girl, straight-A student, university acceptance to McGill, whole life ahead of her. Just needed to get away from small-town pressure. She'd call when she was ready. Except she never called. Years passed. Robert and Margaret kept Veronica's room exactly as she'd left it. They held on to hope, at least publicly. But something changed in them after 1990. Robert's hands developed a tremor. He'd polish his glasses obsessively, twice a day with a cloth handkerchief. Margaret stopped playing piano at church. She'd been the church pianist for 15 years, but after Veronica disappeared, she never touched the keys again. Liam left Milford for university in 1997, studied architecture in Toronto, built a life away from the town that couldn't stop whispering about his missing sister. He came back for Christmas, for funerals, for the inevitable obligations of being an only child to aging parents. Robert died in 2019, heart attack in his sleep. Peaceful, the doctor said. Margaret followed last year. Cancer, quick and merciless. Liam inherited the house, had been putting off dealing with it. Too many memories, too much grief. Now this. He looked around the attic. How many times had his parents been up here, knowing what sat in that tin? How many Christmases had they pulled out decorations, stepping around this secret? The tin hadn't been hidden, not really, just pushed back. Waiting. Liam's phone buzzed in his pocket. Somehow, a single bar of signal had found him. A text from his ex-wife about their daughter's soccer schedule. Normal life, continuing. He ignored it. Instead, he searched for a name. Harriet Drury. The constable who'd investigated Veronica's disappearance had retired years ago, but Liam remembered hearing she'd started some kind of blog about cold cases. Small-town gossip traveled, even to Toronto. He found it within minutes. Ontario's Forgotten, Cold Cases Revisited. The most recent post was from 3 days ago, a case from Thunder Bay, 1987. Drury wrote with the same careful attention to detail he remembered from childhood. Facts, timelines, questions that nagged at her decades later. There was a contact form on the site. Liam climbed down from the attic. The ladder creaked under his weight. The house was silent around him, full of furniture covered in sheets, photos on walls showing a family that no longer existed. He went to the kitchen, made tea he didn't want, stared at his laptop screen. What would he even say? "Hi, you investigated my sister's disappearance 34 years ago. Turns out my parents lied. Here's the evidence." His cursor hovered over the send button. In the living room, the grandfather clock ticked. It had belonged to his grandmother, had been in the family for generations. Veronica used to wind it every Sunday. After she disappeared, Robert took over the task. After Robert died, it stopped. Nobody bothered to wind it anymore. Except it was ticking now. Liam stood up, walked to the living room. The clock's pendulum swung steadily behind its glass door. Someone had wound it recently. But he'd been alone in the house since he arrived yesterday. The real estate agent had keys, but she wouldn't have touched anything. A window was open in the dining room, just an inch, barely noticeable. Liam was certain he'd locked everything before going up to the attic. The house suddenly felt too large and too empty. He returned to the kitchen, grabbed his phone, and sent the email to Harriet Drury before he could reconsider. Short, factual, attached photos of the tin and its contents. Then he called the Milford Police Department. They said they'd send someone over. 30 minutes, maybe 40. Liam went back to the attic. The tin sat where he'd left it, contents undisturbed. In the fading afternoon light, the sequins on Veronica's dress sparkled like stars. He thought about his sister, 18 years old, wearing this dress, going to prom. What happened after she left the school gymnasium? Who were Brian, Tyler, and Joel? The names meant nothing to him. He'd been 11. He didn't pay attention to teenagers, didn't know Veronica's classmates beyond the friends who sometimes came to the house. But someone would remember. Someone in Milford always remembered. His email pinged. Harriet Drury had replied already. "Don't touch anything else. I'm coming over." She arrived before the police did. Liam heard the car pull up, watched from the window as a woman in her late 60s climbed out of a silver Honda. She moved with purpose, carrying a thermos and a worn leather bag. Her face was weathered, hair completely gray, but her eyes were sharp when she looked up at the house. Liam met her at the door. Harriet Drury looked at him for a long moment. "You look like your father," she said. Same expression when things don't add up. She didn't wait for an invitation, walked past him into the house with the confidence of someone who'd been in 1,000 homes under worse circumstances. She stopped in the foyer, looked around. "Haven't been here since 1990, Harriet said. Night we searched Veronica's room. Your mother made tea, Earl Grey. Kept apologizing for the mess, even though the house was spotless. Do you want to see what I found?" In a minute, Harriet poured tea from her thermos into the lid, which doubled as a cup. Bergamot scented the air. She took a sip, tapped her fingers against the cup. "First, tell me exactly where you found it, when, what you touched." Liam walked her through it, the attic, the trunk, the tin behind it, the tape, the date, the contents. He touched everything before he realized what he was looking at. Harriet listened without interrupting, her expression neutral. "The tin was behind the Christmas trunk?" "Yes." "Not hidden inside something else?" "No, just pushed back." Harriet nodded slowly. "Someone wanted it found eventually, or didn't care enough to hide it properly. My mother died a year ago, my father 5 years before that. I know, I read the obituaries." Harriet set down her tea. "Show me." They climbed to the attic together. Harriet moved slowly, careful on the ladder. In the dusty space, she knelt beside the tin without touching it. Pulled reading glasses from her bag, studied the contents from every angle. "Do you recognize the handwriting?" Liam asked. "Veronica's, yes. I looked at her school notebooks for weeks after she disappeared. The second note," Harriet paused, "that's your father's writing." "Yes." "Lord, forgive us." Harriet read the words aloud, testing them. "We cannot let this be known. For her memory." She looked up at Liam. "Not for our reputation, for her memory." "What's the difference?" "Intent. Your parents thought they were protecting Veronica, not themselves. By covering up her death? By covering up what happened to her." Harriet pointed at the note without touching it. She names 3 people: Brian, Tyler, and Joel. "Do those names mean anything to you?" "No." "They will." Harriet stood, joints creaking. "We need to make some calls." The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers, young enough that they probably hadn't been born when Veronica disappeared. They took photos, asked questions, eventually called their supervisor. By evening, the house was full of people, detectives from the regional office, a forensics team, even the police chief, who'd been a rookie in 1990. They took the tin, the dress, the locket, both notes. They took Liam's statement 3 times. They asked about his parents' behavior over the years, about family secrets, about anything unusual. He told them about the tremor in his father's hands, about his mother stopping piano, about the room that stayed frozen in time, a shrine to a girl who never came home. He told them about the basement. In 1991, Robert Lavington had poured concrete over the old storm cellar under the garage, said there was mold, said it was a safety hazard. Liam had been 12. He hadn't questioned it. Why would he? The detective in charge, a woman named Sokoloff, late 40s, efficient, made a note. "We'll need to look at that." Harriet Drury stayed after the others left. She sat with Liam at the kitchen table, the house finally quiet again. "Brian Kershew," Harriet said, captain of the hockey team in 1990. Tyler McDermott, also on the team. Joel Stratton, same. "You remember them?" "I remember everyone from that case. I worked it for 3 years before it went cold. Filed every missing person report update until 2000, when the case was officially suspended." Harriet tapped her pen against her notebook. An old habit, Liam realized. She'd probably been doing it for decades. "Brian Kershew died in 2003. Car accident. Tyler McDermott emigrated to Australia in 1995. Joel Stratton still lives here. Works at the automotive plant." "You memorized all that?" "Some cases don't let go." Harriet looked around the kitchen. "Your father was a good man. I knew him. He taught my niece history at St. Patrick's. He was patient, kind, cared about his students. But good people do terrible things when they're desperate.
You think he and my mother found Veronica's body. I think your parents were confronted with the worst thing that can happen to a parent, and they made a choice. Right or wrong, they made a choice. Harriet closed her notebook. The question is, what happened at that prom? Liam thought about Veronica the morning of June 14th. Nervous, excited, alive. He thought about the last 34 years of his life, built on a lie. There was something else, he said. The grandfather clock in the living room. It was ticking when I came down from the attic. I didn't wind it. Nobody's wound it since my father died. Harriet's expression sharpened. You're sure? Positive. Does anyone else have keys to this house? The real estate agent? That's it. We should check the locks. Harriet stood. All of them. They went through the house room by room. Every door, every window. Everything was secure except that one dining room window Liam had noticed earlier.
Opened just an inch from the inside. Someone was here, Harriet said. Recently. Who? Someone who knows what's in that tin. Someone who's been watching this house. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling Sokolov. But Liam was thinking about 3 names. Brian, Tyler, and Joel. 1 dead, 1 in Australia, 1 still in Milford, living a normal life while Veronica's disappearance became local legend. The investigation that started in an attic on a September afternoon was about to crack open a secret that had been buried for 34 years. But first, they needed to answer a simpler question. If Derek Holloway wasn't the last person to see Veronica alive, who was? The ground-penetrating radar arrived on a Thursday morning. Liam watched from the kitchen window as technicians set up their equipment in the backyard, marking a grid over the old garage foundation. The concrete his father had poured in 1991 was cracked now, weeds growing through the fissures.
33 years of freeze-thaw cycles had done what time always does, revealed what was meant to stay hidden. Detective Sokolov stood beside the lead technician, arms crossed, watching the monitor as the radar sent pulses into the earth. Harriet Drury was there too, thermos in hand, that same sharp attention she'd shown in the Lavington kitchen 3 days ago. Liam couldn't watch. He'd spent the last 72 hours answering questions, reviewing old police reports, looking at photographs of his sister that he'd forgotten existed. Veronica at 16, holding a tennis racket. Veronica at 17, in her St. Patrick's High School uniform. Veronica at 18, 2 weeks before prom, sitting on the front steps of this house with sunlight in her hair. Someone had broken into the house the night he found the tin. The police confirmed it. Fresh scratches on the back door lock, barely visible, but there. Whoever it was hadn't taken anything.
They'd wound the clock, an old superstition, Harriet said, keeping time moving in a house of the dead, and left through the dining room window. The Milford Police Department had reopened the Veronica Lavington case officially. The announcement made the local news, then the regional news, then somehow a true crime podcast out of Toronto picked it up. Suddenly, reporters were calling. Old classmates of Veronica's were posting on social media. The town that had spent 34 years assuming she'd run away now had to confront a different possibility. Liam's phone buzzed constantly. He'd stopped answering. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table with file boxes Harriet had brought over, the original case files from 1990, everything the police had collected during the initial investigation, witness statements, timelines, photographs of evidence. The shoe, silver, high-heeled, size 7.
Found by a farmer named Douglas Chen in bushes along Morrison Road, about 200 meters from St. Patrick's High School. Chen had been checking fence posts the morning of June 15th when he spotted it, called the police. The shoe became the centerpiece of the runaway theory. Veronica had kicked off her uncomfortable prom shoes to walk faster, heading somewhere, anywhere, away from Milford. Except the shoe had Derek Holloway's fingerprints on it. Derek had admitted to finding it first, said he'd been out walking around 3 in the morning, drunk and miserable, looking for Veronica to apologize.
He found the shoe, picked it up, then panicked and threw it back. His story never quite made sense. Why would Veronica be walking barefoot on Morrison Road? Where was the second shoe? If Derek found it at 3 in the morning, why did Douglas Chen find it 12 hours later in almost the same location? The police questioned Derek extensively in 1990. He was 19, working at his father's auto shop, nursing a broken heart and a drinking problem. He dated Veronica for 2 years before she broke up with him in May. Friends said he didn't take it well. Showed up at her house twice, drunk. Left notes in her locker. Classic possessive ex-boyfriend behavior. But Derek had an alibi for most of the night. He'd been at the prom until 11:30, left with friends, went to a party at someone's house near the lake. Multiple witnesses confirmed it. He left the party around 1:30, drove around for a while, alone, no witnesses, then went home around 4. His mother confirmed he came in drunk, slept on the couch. The timeline left a window, 1:30 to 4 in the morning. Plenty of time. Liam read through Derek's statements. The questioning got more aggressive as the investigation progressed. Derek started stuttering when pressed. His lawyer shut down the interrogation on day 5. Without physical evidence, without a body, the police couldn't charge him. The case went cold. A knock at the back door made Liam jump. Harriet came in without waiting, bringing the smell of cold air and bergamot tea. "They found something," she said. Liam's stomach dropped. "In the garage." "An anomaly. Could be remains, could be old construction debris. They're bringing in cadaver dogs tomorrow." Harriet sat across from him, looked at the files spread across the table. "You're reading about Derek?" "His story doesn't make sense." None of the stories from that night make complete sense. That's what happens with trauma and alcohol and teenagers lying to protect each other. Harriet pulled one of the files closer. "But I've been thinking about that shoe for 34 years. Why only one? Where's the other? Maybe she really did kick them off. Maybe, or maybe someone staged it." Harriet opened another file. "I went back through everything yesterday.
Found something I'd forgotten about. A witness statement from Cynthia Wright. She was a classmate of Veronica's. What did she say? Not much, not in 1990. Harriet pulled out a photocopy of a handwritten statement. But I called her yesterday. She lives in Ottawa now, works for the government. And she told me something she didn't tell us back then." Liam waited. "Cynthia saw Derek at the school around 2 in the morning. She was driving home from a different party, took the route past St. Patrick's. Derek was in the parking lot with a flashlight, searching the bushes near the back entrance. She didn't think much of it at the time, figured he was drunk, looking for his keys or whatever. But when I asked her yesterday if he seemed panicked or guilty, she said no. She said he seemed methodical, purposeful, like he was looking for something specific, or planting something. The implication hung between them."
If Derek planted the shoe to create a false trail, then he knew Veronica wasn't walking home. He knew she was already dead, or he knew where she was. Liam's hands were shaking. He twisted his wedding ring, remembered he wasn't wearing it anymore, grabbed his coffee mug instead. The coffee was cold. Everything in this house was cold. "The names in the note," Liam said. "Brian, Tyler, Joel. Have you found them?" "Found them. Talked to 2 of them." Harriet pulled out her notebook. "Brian Kershaw died in 2003, like I said. But I tracked down Tyler McDermott in Melbourne. Took some doing, but I got him on a video call yesterday." "And?" "He remembered Veronica, said she was beautiful, popular, way out of his league. Said he barely spoke to her in 4 years of high school. When I asked if anything happened at the prom, he got quiet. Said it was a long time ago. Said he couldn't remember details." He's lying. Everyone lies about something. Question is, what and why? Harriet flipped pages. "Joel Stratton wouldn't talk to me at all, hung up the phone. His wife called back an hour later, said Joel wants a lawyer before he says anything about 1990. That's basically an admission of guilt. It's self-preservation. Could mean he's guilty, could mean he's scared of being accused." Harriet tapped her pen against the notebook. "But here's what's interesting. I pulled yearbook photos. Brian, Tyler, and Joel were all on the hockey team, all part of the same social circle, all at the prom that night. Were they friends with Derek? No, different groups. Derek was more of a loner, worked with his hands, came from the east side of town. The hockey guys were affluent, college-bound, pillars of the community type. Their paths wouldn't have crossed much. Except through Veronica. Except through Veronica. Harriet closed the notebook. I've been doing this long enough to recognize patterns. 3 boys from the same social group named in a suicide note, and 34 years later, they're all defensive and evasive. Something happened at that prom. Detective Sokoloff came to the door an hour later. She looked tired. The investigation was stretching her department thin. They weren't equipped for a case this complex, this old. The Ontario Provincial Police had offered assistance. The media pressure wasn't helping. We need to exhume the garage foundation, Sokoloff said without preamble. Judge signed the warrant this morning. Work starts tomorrow. Liam nodded. He'd expected this. Dreaded it, but expected it. There's something else, Sokoloff continued. We picked up Derek Holloway this morning, brought him in for questioning. Voluntary, technically, but his lawyer's present. He agreed to talk. Surprisingly, yes. He says he's tired of running from this. Says he's been waiting 34 years for someone to believe him. Sokoloff looked between Liam and Harriet. He wants to tell you what really happened that night. The Milford Police Department interview room was exactly what Liam expected. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, table bolted to the floor. Derek Holloway sat on one side, his lawyer beside him. Derek was 53 now, but he looked older. Gray hair, weathered face, hands stained with motor oil that no amount of scrubbing would remove. He had the build of someone who worked with his body, strong shoulders, calloused palms. He was crying. I didn't hurt her, Derek said as soon as Liam and Harriet entered. His voice cracked. The stutter Liam had read about in the old reports was still there, worse under stress. I swear to God, I didn't hurt Veronica. I loved her. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Forst, put a hand on his arm. Derek, we discussed. I don't care. I need to say this. Derek looked directly at Liam. You were just a kid. You probably don't even remember me, but I was at your house all the time. I had dinner with your family. Your mom made me feel welcome, even though I was just some towny kid dating her daughter. And I screwed it up. I was jealous and stupid, and I drank too much, and Veronica was right to break up with me. Liam said nothing. Sokoloff started the recording equipment, stated the date and time and who was present. Derek took a shaky breath. The night of the prom, I was drunk. I'm not proud of it. I went to the dance because I couldn't stand the idea of Veronica being there without me. I watched her all night. She looked beautiful. That blue dress. She always looked good in blue. Mr. Holloway, Sokoloff said gently, tell us about the shoe. I found it around 2:30, maybe 3. I was driving around, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about her. I drove past the school and I thought I saw someone. A shadow, maybe. I don't know. I was drunk. So I parked and I walked around with my flashlight, looking. Looking for what? For Veronica. I thought maybe she was still there. Maybe her ride fell through. Maybe I could drive her home, talk to her. I don't know. Drunk logic. Derek wiped his eyes. I found the shoe in the bushes near the back entrance. Just one. I picked it up because I thought she might need it. Then I panicked. If anyone saw me with it, they'd think I did something. So I threw it back. But you moved it, Harriet said. Douglas Chen found it 200 meters away, along Morrison Road. Derek looked confused. No, I threw it back in the same bushes. I'm sure of it. Someone moved it between 3 a.m. and when Chen found it at 6:30 a.m., Sokoloff said. Any idea who? No. Did you see anyone else that night? Any cars? Any people? Derek hesitated. That hesitation told Liam everything. Derek had seen something. Someone. Mr. Holloway, Patricia Forst said quietly. Answer the question. There was a car, Derek said finally. Leaving the school parking lot as I was pulling in. A blue Camaro. I noticed because it was nice. Newer. Not many kids at St. Patrick's drove cars like that. Harriet and Sokoloff exchanged glances. Do you know who owned a blue Camaro? Sokoloff asked. Brian Kershaw. His dad bought it for him when he got accepted to Queen's University. The name from the note. Brian Kershaw, dead since 2003, unable to defend himself or confess. Convenient, Liam thought, or tragic. What time did you see the Camaro leaving? Around 2:45, maybe? I didn't check exactly. And you didn't think to mention this in 1990? I did mention it. Derek's voice rose. I told Constable Drury. I told her I saw Brian's car. She wrote it down. But then everyone started treating me like I was guilty, and my lawyer said to stop talking, and he trailed off. I was scared. I was 19 and scared, and everyone in town thought I killed my girlfriend. Harriet pulled out her old case files, flipped through them rapidly, found what she was looking for. A supplementary report dated June 18, 1990. Her handwriting, younger and neater than it was now. Derek Holloway reports seeing Brian Kershaw's vehicle, blue 1989 Chevrolet Camaro, leaving St. Patrick's High School parking lot at approximately 2:45 a.m. on June 15th. Followed up with Brian Kershaw on June 19th. States he left prom at 11 p.m., drove to Lake Party with Tyler McDermott and Joel Stratton, stayed until 2 a.m., drove home, corroborated by friends. Vehicle was at Kershaw residence when officer visited at 9 a.m. on June 19th. Harriet looked up slowly. I followed up. Brian's story checked out. Multiple witnesses placed him at the lake until 2. His parents confirmed the car was in their driveway by morning. But Derek saw him leaving the school at 2:45, Liam said. Derek was drunk, traumatized. In 1990, I made a judgment call.
The lake is only 10 minutes from the school. Brian could have left the party at 2, driven past the school for some reason, been home by 3. Not impossible, but also not particularly suspicious. Except now we know something happened at that school, Sokoloff said. Something involving Brian, Tyler, and Joel. Something bad enough that Veronica wrote their names in her final note. Derek made a sound, half sob, half gasp. What note? They told him. Not everything, but enough. The tin, the dress, the words Veronica had written. Brian, Tyler, and Joel. Derek's face went through several emotions. Shock, grief, rage. They hurt her, he whispered. Those bastards hurt her and then they just... What? Went on with their lives? We don't know exactly what happened yet, Sokoloff said. Yes, you do. You know. That's why you're asking about them. Derek stood up, his lawyer trying to pull him back down. Brian Kershaw was a piece of shit.
Everyone thought he was so perfect because he could skate fast and smile for photos, but he was cruel. He used to corner freshman girls, make them uncomfortable, laugh about it with his friends. Everyone knew. Nobody did anything because his father was on the school board. Did Veronica ever mention problems with Brian? Harriet asked. Yeah, once. Maybe a month before prom. She said Brian made a comment to her in the hallway, something crude. She told him to go to hell. He laughed it off, but she said there was something in his eyes, something mean. The pieces were assembling themselves, slowly, into a picture Liam didn't want to see. 3 hockey players, a girl alone at prom. Something that happened after Derek left, after most people had gone home. Something that drove Veronica to write that note. Where's your father? Liam asked suddenly. Derek blinked. What? Your father. You said you worked at his auto shop. He died in 2010. Why? Because someone broke into my parents' house this week. Someone who knew about the tin. Someone who's trying to stay ahead of this investigation. Liam looked at Sokoloff. Joel Stratton still lives in Milford. Tyler McDermott is in Australia, but could hire someone local. Brian Kershaw is dead, but does he have family here? Wife and 2 adult children, Sokoloff said. We've been trying to reach them for comment. They're not answering calls. Try harder. Harriet was very quiet, studying her old notes. When she finally spoke, her voice was troubled. I made a mistake in 1990. I believed Brian's alibi because multiple people confirmed it. But teenagers lie for each other, especially teenagers from wealthy families who have something to lose. It's not your fault, Liam said. Isn't it? I was the lead investigator. I directed the focus toward Derek because he was the obvious suspect. I didn't push hard enough on other leads. Harriet closed the file. Brian Kershew, Tyler McDermott, and Joel Stratton were at that lake party until 2 a.m. Multiple witnesses. But what if they left the party, drove back to the school, and were back at the lake by 3? Or what if they never went to the lake at all? What if their friends lied? Why would their friends lie about something that serious? Patricia Forst asked. Because in 1990, we were investigating a missing person, not a homicide. The stakes seemed lower, and these were kids from good families, protecting one of their own. Harriet stood. We need to re-interview everyone who was at that lake party. 34 years later, people's loyalties change. Guilt gets heavier. The exhumation began at dawn the next day. Liam watched from the kitchen window again, unable to look away this time. Heavy equipment breaking through concrete. Workers in white suits carefully removing debris, sifting through soil, documenting everything. Harriet stood beside him. Neither of them had slept much. They'd spent the night going through yearbooks, cross-referencing names, building a list of everyone who'd been at the lake party on June 14, 1990. 17 names, most still in the area. Some had moved away, but social media made them easy to find. Sokolov had officers calling them, asking them to come in voluntarily for re-interviews. The cadaver dogs alerted, Harriet said quietly, just before you came downstairs. There's something under that concrete. Liam closed his eyes. He'd known, logically, that this was coming, but knowing and experiencing were different things. His sister, buried in his parents' garage for 34 years. His parents living with that secret, that weight, until they died. Why didn't they just call the police? Liam asked. When they found her, why didn't they just call? Shame, fear, love in a twisted way. Harriet sipped her tea. Your parents were devout Catholics. Suicide was a sin. If they called the police, everyone would know.
The whole town would know what happened to Veronica, what was done to her, how she died. Your parents couldn't bear that, so they made her disappear completely. Let people think she ran away, started over somewhere. Better than the truth. They let Derek suffer, let everyone think he might have killed her. They let a lot of people suffer, including themselves. Harriet watched the excavation. I don't think they ever intended the truth to come out. They probably planned to take the secret to their graves. The tin was insurance, maybe, or minsurance, a confession they couldn't make while alive. Detective Sokolov came to the door at 10:30. Her expression told them everything before she spoke. We found remains. Female, approximate age 18 to 25. Forensics will confirm, but... She looked at Liam. I'm sorry. Liam nodded. He couldn't speak. There's something else, Sokolov continued. The medical examiner did a preliminary assessment.
Cause of death is consistent with the scenario described in the note. There's no evidence of the remains being moved post-mortem, which means she died somewhere else, Harriet finished. And my parents brought her here. Most likely the school, Sokolov said. We're getting a warrant to search the building. It's been partially renovated since 1990, but there might still be evidence. The next 48 hours moved in a blur. Forensics confirmed the remains were Veronica Lavington. Dental records matched. The dress, the locket, the note, all authentic. The investigation officially became a homicide case, though the determination of who is criminally responsible remained complex. Officers re-interviewed everyone from the lake party. Stories started to crack. 34 years was a long time to maintain a lie, especially when the stakes had changed. A woman named Kelly Frazier, she'd been Kelly Morrison in 1990, Veronica's best friend, came in on day 3.
She'd moved to Vancouver, had a family, a career in real estate. She sat across from Sokolov and Harriet and cried before anyone asked a question. I knew something was wrong that night, Kelly said. Veronica left the prom early. She seemed upset. I asked if she wanted me to come with her, but she said no. She just needed air. That was the last time I saw her. Did she mention Brian, Tyler, or Joel? Kelly hesitated. There was an incident earlier in the evening. Brian made a comment to Veronica when she was getting punch, something sexual. Veronica threw the punch in his face. Everyone saw. It was humiliating for Brian. His friends laughed. How did Brian react? He smiled. That's what was scary. He just smiled and walked away. Other witnesses confirmed it. Brian Kershaw, drunk and humiliated, had been furious beneath the smile. He'd left the gymnasium around 11 with Tyler and Joel. Several people saw them go. The assumption was they went to the lake party.
But Sarah Chen, Douglas Chen's daughter, the same Douglas who found the shoe, remembered something different. She'd been in the school parking lot at 11:15, smoking cigarettes with friends. She saw Brian's Camaro parked near the back entrance. All 3 boys were sitting in it, windows down, music playing. They were still there when Sarah and her friends left around 11:30. They weren't at the lake party until after midnight, Harriet said, marking the timeline on a whiteboard in the police station, which means the alibi was always partial. They showed up late, stayed until 2, then someone, probably Brian, drove back to the school. Why go back? Liam asked. Because something happened between 11:30 and midnight, something they needed to return to. Joel Stratton's lawyer called that afternoon. Joel wanted to make a statement. He'd meet with police, but only with full immunity. He'd testify to everything in exchange for no prosecution. The district attorney spent 6 hours negotiating. In the end, given the age of the case and the difficulty of prosecution, they agreed. Limited immunity for full cooperation and testimony. Joel Stratton came in the next morning. He was 52, balding, with the soft middle of someone who worked at a desk. His hands shook as he sat down. His lawyer, a Toronto firm specializing in criminal defense, had clearly prepped him extensively. But when Joel started talking, it wasn't rehearsed, it was confession. "We were drunk," Joel said. "That's not an excuse, just context." Brian was angry about the punch incident. Veronica embarrassed him in front of everyone. Tyler and I were trying to calm him down. We sat in the car for a while, drinking from a flask Brian had. Then we saw her. Saw who? Veronica. She came out of the school through the back entrance, alone. She looked upset. Brian said we should talk to her, apologize for his comment earlier. Tyler and I thought that was a good idea, so we followed her. Joel stopped, swallowed hard. She went to the old dark room, the photography club room. It wasn't used much anymore, but the door was unlocked. She went inside, and Brian said we should go in too, to talk. That's what he said. Just to talk. What time was this? Maybe 11:35, 11:40? I don't know exactly. What happened in the dark room? Joel's lawyer put a hand on his arm, whispered something. Joel shook his head. I need to say it. I've needed to say it for 34 years. He looked at Liam. Brian went in first, then Tyler, then me. Veronica was sitting on one of the old counters. She told us to leave. Brian started talking, apologizing, but he was standing too close. She told him to back up. He didn't. And then Joel broke down completely. His lawyer provided tissues, water. It took 5 minutes before he could continue. It escalated. Tyler grabbed her arm. She tried to leave. Brian blocked the door. I should have stopped it. I should have walked out, but I didn't. I just stood there. And then Brian, and then Tyler. And I didn't participate, but I didn't stop it either. I just stood there and watched and did nothing. The room was silent except for Joel's crying. When it was over, Veronica was on the floor. She wasn't moving much. She was crying. Brian said we needed to leave, said she'd be fine, said if we told anyone, we'd all do to jail. So we left. We went to the lake party like nothing happened. We stayed late so people would remember seeing us. And then we left around 2, and Brian drove back to check on her. Why did Brian go back? Because he was scared. He wanted to make sure she was okay, make sure she wasn't telling anyone. But when we got back to the school, Joel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. The dark room was empty. Veronica was gone. We searched everywhere, couldn't find her. Brian panicked.
He found one of her shoes in the bushes outside the back entrance. He didn't know what to do with it. Eventually, he threw it in his trunk and we left. What happened to the shoe? Brian drove me and Tyler home. Then he told us later he went back again around 4 in the morning and planted the shoe further from the school. He thought if people found it, they'd think she walked away, that she left on her own. Did Brian tell you what he did with the other shoe? He said he threw it in the lake. Harriet leaned forward. Did Brian ever admit what really happened to Veronica? No. He swore he didn't know. Said she must have left while we were at the lake party. He was scared, but he convinced himself she was fine, that she'd just run away. Did you believe him? Joel was quiet for a long moment. No. I think he knew. I think he went back a third time, maybe later that night or early the next morning, and found her. But he never told us.
And when the investigation started, we all stuck to our story. We were at the lake all night. We didn't see Veronica after the prom. We knew nothing. You maintained that lie for 34 years. Yes. Even after Brian died in 2003. Especially after Brian died. He was the one who did the most. Tyler and I were accomplices, but Brian was the instigator. With him dead, Tyler and I thought we were safe. We thought the secret died with him. Sokolov slid a photo across the table. The note Veronica had written. Brian, Tyler, and Joel. She named all 3 of you. Joel looked at the photo and started crying again. I know she did. And she was right. We all did it. We all destroyed her. The statement took 4 hours to complete. Joel provided every detail he could remember. Times, locations, specific actions. His testimony would be the foundation of the case, even though Brian Kershaw was dead and therefore beyond prosecution.
Tyler McDermott was extradited from Australia 2 weeks later. He initially refused to cooperate, but when presented with Joel's full statement and the physical evidence, he also confessed. His version matched Joel's in most details. The picture that emerged was devastating. Veronica Lavington had been assaulted in the St. Patrick's High School darkroom by 3 members of the hockey team. She'd been left injured and traumatized. At some point after they left, maybe an hour later, maybe less, she'd written the note using a pen Joel had left behind. A Parker fountain pen, black ink, that Joel's father had given him for graduation. And then she'd taken her own life. Robert and Margaret Lavington, unable to sleep, worried about their daughter not coming home, had gone to the school around 4:30 in the morning. Robert had keys as a teacher. They found Veronica in the darkroom. They found the note. And they made the decision that would define the rest of their lives.
They cleaned the scene as best they could. They took Veronica's body, her dress, her locket, the note. They staged a runaway, left the room looking like she'd simply left, moved one shoe to create a trail. And they brought their daughter home to bury her quietly, privately, where no one would know the truth. The autopsy report, completed 34 years late, confirmed the timeline. Veronica had died sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. on June 15, 1990. The specific cause was consistent with her note. There was evidence of assault. There was evidence of trauma. There was evidence of a tragedy that destroyed multiple families and poisoned a town for 3 decades. The charges came down in December. Joel Stratton and Tyler McDermott were each charged with sexual assault and accessory after the fact in concealing evidence. Brian Kershaw would have faced similar charges, but he'd been dead for 21 years.
His family issued a statement through their lawyer. Shock, denial, pain. The Milford community fractured. Some people defended the 3 men. They were just kids, they were drunk, it was a mistake. Others called for maximum sentences. The church where Margaret Lavington had played piano split over whether to offer prayers for Joel's family. Derek Holloway gave one interview to the local newspaper. He looked exhausted. I spent 34 years thinking I could have saved her, Derek said. Thinking if I'd just been a better boyfriend, if I hadn't been so jealous and stupid, she'd still be alive. I blamed myself every single day.
And it turns out it was never about me at all. It was about 3 guys who decided her body belonged to them. The trial was set for the following year. Joel and Tyler both pled guilty in exchange for reduced sentences, 8 years each. They'd be eligible for parole in 5. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was something.
The detail that changed everything was in a photograph Harriet Drury had taken 34 years ago. She found it on a Sunday morning in January, 6 weeks after Joel Stratton's confession, while digitizing the old case files. The photograph showed Veronica Lavington's bedroom as it appeared on June 15, 1990. Standard evidence documentation. Bed neatly made, dresser organized, everything in its place. The room of a girl who planned to come home. But in the bottom corner of the frame, barely visible on Veronica's desk, sat a Parker fountain pen. Black, identical to the one Joel Stratton claimed to have left in the darkroom. Harriet stared at the photograph for 10 minutes before calling Sokolov. Joel said he left his pen in the darkroom, Harriet said when Sokolov answered. That's how Veronica wrote the note. But there's a Parker pen in her bedroom, on her desk, in the photograph I took the morning after she disappeared. Sokolov was quiet for a moment. Could she have owned the same type of pen? Possible, but Joel was very specific. He said his father gave him that pen for graduation. He said he remembered leaving it on the counter in the darkroom when they left. He said that's why Veronica used black ink instead of her usual blue. So either Joel's lying about the pen, or someone else wrote that note. The silence on the line stretched long. Harriet, Sokolov said carefully, are you suggesting the Lavingtons forged their daughter's suicide note? I'm suggesting we need to verify the handwriting again, more thoroughly this time. The note was re-examined by 3 separate forensic document examiners. 2 confirmed what the initial analysis had shown. The handwriting matched Veronica Lavington's. Pressure patterns, letter formation, natural variations, all consistent with her writing samples. The 3rd examiner found something different. Dr. Raymond Okonkwo specialized in historical document analysis. He'd testified in dozens of cases involving questioned documents. He examined the note under different lighting, used advanced imaging technology, compared it to extensive samples of Veronica's handwriting from her school notebooks and personal letters. His report arrived 2 weeks later. The handwriting is consistent with Veronica Lavington's natural hand, Dr. Okonkwo wrote. However, there are indicators of guided writing or writing under duress. The pressure is unusually uniform. The spacing is more regular than in her natural samples. Most significantly, there are hesitation marks at the beginning of several words, as if the writer was copying from a draft rather than composing spontaneously. Someone had told Veronica what to write, or someone had written it for her to copy. Or, and this was the possibility that made Liam's stomach turn, someone had traced her handwriting after she was already dead. We need to exhume the case completely, Harriet said. She sat in Liam's kitchen, the house that was no longer his parents' house, that was barely his house, that felt like a museum of lies. Go back to the beginning. Question everything we thought we knew. Liam had spent the last 2 months trying to process what Joel and Tyler had confessed to, trying to understand how 3 teenage boys could do what they did and then return to their lives, trying to understand how his parents could bury their daughter and lie to everyone. Now he had to consider something worse. "You think my parents killed her," Liam said. It wasn't a question. "I think we need to eliminate that possibility." They found her in the darkroom. After what those 3 did to her, she wrote the note and they found her. That's the story that made sense with what Joel told us. But if the note was forced or forged, then the story changes. Harriet opened her laptop, pulled up her case files. Let's walk through it differently.
Veronica is assaulted in the darkroom around 11:40 p.m. Brian, Tyler, and Joel leave. They go to the lake party, establish alibis. Brian returns to the school around 2:45 a.m. Derek saw his car. What did Brian find when he went back? Joel said the darkroom was empty. Joel said Brian told him the darkroom was empty. But what if Brian was lying? What if Veronica was still there, injured, alive, and Brian... Harriet stopped. Even after 34 years as a police officer, some sentences were hard to finish. "You think Brian killed her to keep her quiet?" Liam said. "I think it's possible." Then he staged the scene to look like suicide, wrote the note himself, or forced her to write it. The note names all three of them. Why would Veronica do that if she was trying to protect her reputation? Why not just say what happened? Unless someone needed to create a narrative that explained everything while still maintaining deniability. Liam thought about Brian Kershaw. Dead since 2003. Car accident on Highway 7, drunk driving. He'd been 32 years old, married with 2 kids, worked at his father's insurance company. By all accounts, a normal life. If Brian killed her, what about my parents? They still buried her. They still covered it up. Different crime, same result. Maybe they found her after Brian left. Maybe they found her and the note, and they believed the note was real. They're grieving, in shock, devout Catholics horrified by the idea of their daughter's suicide being public knowledge. So they do what people do when they're desperate. They hide the truth. It made sense in a horrible way, but it also raised more questions. "The shoe," Liam said. "Brian planted one shoe. Where's the other one?" Good question. Harriet pulled up another file. Derek found one shoe around 2:30 a.m. Douglas Chen found the same shoe in a different location 6 hours later. Brian's fingerprints were never on it, only Derek's and Chen's. Which means Brian handled a different shoe, the second one. Joel said Brian threw it in the lake. Joel said a lot of things, some true, some convenient. Harriet zoomed in on a map of Milford. The lake is 3 kilometers from the school. If Brian threw a shoe in the lake at 2:45 a.m., why was he back in his driveway by 3 a.m.? That's what his parents told me in 1990. They heard his car pull in around 3. He didn't go to the lake. Or he went somewhere closer. Liam looked at the map. The school, the Kershaw house, the Lavington house. 3 points forming a triangle. The Lavington house was less than a kilometer from the school. "You think Brian came here," Liam said slowly. "I think Brian might have needed to hide evidence quickly. A shoe with blood or DNA on it. Where would a 19-year-old boy hide something at 3 in the morning? Somewhere familiar. Somewhere he'd been before." Harriet pulled up another file. Statements from Veronica's friends. One caught Liam's attention. Kelly Frazier again, talking about people Veronica had dated before Derek. Veronica briefly dated Brian Kershaw in 10th grade, Kelly had told police in 1990. It lasted maybe a month. Brian wanted more than Veronica did. She broke up with him. He didn't take it well. Brian had been to this house, Liam said, years before, when he was dating Veronica. And he knew the layout, knew the backyard, the garage, the property. Harriet closed her laptop. "We should search the property again, more thoroughly this time." The search warrant was approved within 48 hours. Forensics teams returned to the Lavington house, this time focusing on areas they'd previously cleared. The garage foundation had already been excavated. Now they looked at the garden, the shed, the crawl space under the back porch. They found the second shoe in the chimney. It was wrapped in a plastic bag, shoved far up the flue where it wouldn't be visible from below. The bag had protected it from weather and animals. After 34 years, the evidence was remarkably preserved. Silver high-heeled shoe, size 7, matched to the one found in 1990. Blood on the inside. DNA testing would take weeks, but the blood type was O positive, Veronica's blood type. And on the outside of the plastic bag, barely visible, a partial fingerprint. Brian Kershaw's fingerprint. "He came here," Sokolov said. She stood in the Lavington living room while forensics worked outside. After he left the school, he had the second shoe, probably took both shoes initially to make it look like Veronica walked away barefoot. He planted one shoe to create a trail. He kept the other because it had too much evidence on it, and he hid it here, in a house he knew, thinking no one would ever look. "Why not just destroy it?" Liam asked. Panic, poor decision-making, or maybe he planned to retrieve it later and never got the chance. Sokolov looked at Harriet. "This changes Joel's testimony significantly. If Brian had both shoes, If Brian was planting evidence, if Brian hid the second shoe here, he was actively covering up a crime scene. Not just the assault, something more. Murder, Harriet said quietly. Brian went back to that dark room at 2:45 a.m. and Veronica was still alive. And whatever happened after that, he spent the rest of the night covering it up. The investigation shifted again. Forensics re-examined every piece of evidence with this new theory in mind. The note, the dress, the timeline, the witness statements. A pattern emerged. Veronica's dress had been carefully folded in the tin, not torn off and discarded, but folded. The locket had been placed gently beside it, not thrown. These weren't the actions of a traumatized girl in her final moments. These were the actions of someone staging a scene. The note itself showed more anomalies under closer examination. Dr. Okonkwo pointed out that the paper had been torn from a notebook, but none of Veronica's notebooks had matching torn pages. The paper could have come from anywhere, including Joel's notebook or Brian's. And the content of the note was wrong. Veronica was a writer, Kelly Fraser said when Sokoloff interviewed her again. She kept journals. She wrote poetry. If she was going to write a final note, it would have been longer, more personal, more her. This note is functional. It names names and apologizes, and that's it. It doesn't sound like Veronica at all. The timeline tightened. Brian left the lake party at 2 a.m., was seen at the school at 2:45 a.m., and was in his driveway at 3 a.m. 15 minutes at the school. Enough time to find Veronica, realize she was a threat to him, and make a terrible decision. Then he spent the next hour hiding evidence, the shoe in the chimney. The second shoe moved to Morrison Road later. He must have gone back out after his parents were asleep, creating a trail away from the truth. But what about Robert and Margaret Lavington? When did they find their daughter? Liam remembered his father's behavior in the weeks after Veronica disappeared. The tremor in his hands, the obsessive glass cleaning, the way he'd asked Harriet about the school basement that first day. He knew something was wrong at the school, Liam said. He taught there. He knew the building. What if he went there that morning before calling the police? What if he found her? Harriet pulled up her original report from June 15, 1990. Margaret Lavington called 911 at 9:17 a.m. to report Veronica missing. But in my notes, Robert told me he'd woken up at 6 and noticed Veronica's bed hadn't been slept in. Why wait 3 hours to call? Because he went to look for her first and found her in the darkroom, already dead. With the note beside her, a note he believed was real because it was in his daughter's handwriting. Harriet paused. But Robert was a smart man, a history teacher. He would have seen inconsistencies, would have questioned things. Unless he couldn't bear to question it. Unless accepting the note as real was easier than accepting the alternative. The case file contained a detail Liam had missed before. When police searched the Lavington house on June 15th, Robert's car had mud on the tires. Fresh mud. Margaret mentioned it during her interview, apologized for the mess, said Robert had been out early checking on something at the school garden. He was on the gardening committee. But St. Patrick's High School didn't have a garden in 1990. He went to the school that morning, Sokolov said. Found Veronica. Made a decision. She looked at Liam. I'm sorry. This doesn't make what your parents did any better. But it might explain why. The final piece came from an unexpected source. Brian Kershew's widow, Jennifer Kershew, reached out to Sokolov in February. She'd been silent since the investigation started, protecting her children, processing the revelation that her dead husband had been involved in a crime. But something had been bothering her. Brian had nightmares, Jennifer said during the interview. Her voice was thin, exhausted. For years, he'd wake up screaming about drowning, about dark water. I thought it was stress from work. He drank too much. We had problems. But now I wonder. Wonder what? Sokolov asked gently. If it was guilt. If he was dreaming about what he'd done. Jennifer pulled out a photograph. I found this in his things after he died. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now. The photograph showed Brian at the lake, summer 1990, just weeks after Veronica's disappearance. He was with Tyler and Joel, all three of them on a dock, smiling for the camera.
Normal teenagers enjoying summer. But in the background, barely visible, was a boat. And in the boat was something wrapped in what looked like a tarp. "I remember that day," Jennifer said. "I took this photo. Brian said they were disposing of some old equipment from the hockey rink, taking it out to the deep part of the lake. I didn't question it." Harriet stared at the photograph. "What kind of equipment?" He didn't say specifically, just said it was broken, needed to be disposed of. He was acting strange that day, jumpy. He and Tyler and Joel kept whispering to each other. The lake where the prom night party had been held was called Kennecott Lake, maximum depth 47 meters in the center. In 1990, the Milford Police Department didn't have resources for underwater searches. The lake had never been searched. The underwater recovery team arrived from Toronto in March. They brought sonar equipment, diving gear, and grim determination.
The photograph gave them a general location. The dock in the background was identifiable, part of a public access point on the North Shore. The search took 3 days. They found old boats, fishing equipment, decades of discarded trash. And on day 3, 42 meters down, they found a toolbox. Heavy metal, rusted, locked with a combination lock that had long since seized. Inside were items wrapped in plastic. A Parker fountain pen, black, identical to the one Joel described. A St. Patrick's High School yearbook from 1990, waterlogged but intact, and a Polaroid photograph. The photograph showed Veronica Lavington in the darkroom, unconscious or dead, her blue prom dress torn, and written on the white border in faded ink, "Insurance, 61590, BK." Brian Kershew had documented what he'd done, kept evidence as insurance against Joel and Tyler ever talking.
And when it became too dangerous to keep in his possession, he disposed of it in the one place he thought no one would ever look. The photograph made everything clear. Veronica hadn't written the note. She couldn't have. She was already gone by the time the note was composed. Brian had written it, carefully copying her handwriting from notebooks he'd stolen or borrowed. He'd made it look like suicide, named himself and his accomplices to create a narrative that explained everything, and planted it beside her body. Robert Lavington had found his daughter that morning, found the note, and believed it. In his grief and shame, unable to accept that his daughter's final act would condemn her soul in the eyes of the church, he and Margaret had buried her quietly. They'd taken the evidence, hidden it, and created the runaway story. They never knew Brian Kershew had murdered their daughter. They thought they were protecting her memory from the stigma of suicide. 2 crimes, Harriet said. She sat in the Milford Police Department conference room, surrounded by decades of evidence. Brian Kershew assaulted and murdered Veronica Lavington. Robert and Margaret Lavington concealed their daughter's death and obstructed justice. Both sets of parents destroyed evidence. Both created false narratives. And in the middle of it all, a girl who died at 18. Liam sat beside her, looking at the photograph from the toolbox, his sister's face frozen in the worst moment of her short life. He wanted to look away. He forced himself to keep looking. "Why keep the photo?" he asked. "Why not destroy everything?" Control. Brian wanted leverage over Tyler and Joel. As long as he had proof of what they'd done, they'd never talk. And for 13 years, it worked. Then Brian died in that car accident, and Tyler and Joel thought they were free. Harriet closed the file. They almost were. If you hadn't found that tin, if your parents hadn't left that evidence, we never would have reopened this case. Veronica would have stayed missing forever. The district attorney announced the new findings in a press conference in April. The charges against Joel Stratton and Tyler McDermott were amended to include accessory to murder. Their plea deals were voided. They'd face trial for the full extent of their involvement. Brian Kershew couldn't be prosecuted, but his name would forever be associated with Veronica's murder. His children changed their surnames. His widow moved away. The insurance company his father had built was sold. Robert and Margaret Lavington's role was more complex legally. They were dead, beyond prosecution, but their actions had obstructed a murder investigation for 34 years. The district attorney issued a statement acknowledging their crimes, while noting that they'd likely believed they were responding to a suicide, not covering up a homicide. Liam didn't know how to feel about his parents anymore. They'd lied to him his entire life. They'd buried his sister in their garage and let him grow up thinking she'd abandoned the family. But they'd also been victims of Brian's deception, of their own grief and faith. "People are complicated," Harriet said when Liam expressed this during one of their now regular tea conversations. "Your parents did terrible things for what they thought were good reasons. That doesn't make the things less terrible, but it might make your parents a little more human." Veronica was reburied in May. Proper funeral this time, at the church where Margaret used to play piano. The whole town came, some to pay respects, some out of morbid curiosity, some seeking forgiveness for the gossip they'd spread about a girl who ran away. Derek Holloway came. He stood at the back of the church, crying quietly. After the service, he approached Liam. "I should have looked harder for her," Derek said, that night. "If I'd searched the school instead of just the parking lot." "You were 19 and drunk and heartbroken," Liam said. "You couldn't have known. Neither could you. You were just a kid." Derek wiped his eyes. "I spent 34 years hating myself for losing her. Now I know I never had her to lose. She was already gone." Kelly Fraser came too. She brought flowers, irises, Veronica's favorites. She told Liam stories about his sister that he'd never heard. Veronica's laugh, her terrible singing voice, the way she'd snort when something was really funny. The girl behind the tragedy. "She should have had a whole life," Kelly said. "Career, family, adventures. She should have gotten old. Instead, she got one night that went wrong, and 3 boys who couldn't accept no for an answer." The trial began in September. Joel Stratton and Tyler McDermott pleaded not guilty to the amended charges, despite the overwhelming evidence. Their lawyers argued they hadn't known about Brian's actions after leaving the darkroom. They were guilty of assault, but not murder, not accessory to murder. The prosecution presented the toolbox evidence, the fingerprints, the testimony of Jennifer Kershew about the boat trip. They showed how Tyler and Joel had helped dispose of evidence, how they'd maintained their lies for 34 years, how they'd only confessed when they thought Brian was the sole murderer. The jury deliberated for 3 days, guilty on all counts. Joel Stratton was sentenced to 23 years. Tyler McDermott received 25. Both men were in their 50s now. They'd be elderly when they were released, if they lived that long. At sentencing, Joel asked to make a statement. The judge allowed it. "I was 17 when this happened," Joel said. His voice was steady, but tears ran down his face. "That's not an excuse. I was old enough to know right from wrong. I was old enough to stop what was happening. I was old enough to call for help after. Instead, I chose to protect myself and my friends. I chose to let Veronica disappear. I chose my comfort over her justice. I'm sorry. I know that's inadequate. I know sorry doesn't bring her back or give her family peace. But it's all I have." Tyler McDermott said nothing. He stared at the floor during sentencing, expressionless. Liam attended every day of the trial, watched the evidence presented, heard the testimonies, saw the photographs. It was excruciating and necessary. He needed to witness justice, however delayed, however imperfect. When it was over, he sold his parents' house. Couldn't bear to keep it, couldn't bear to live in a place where so many secrets had festered. He used the money to establish a scholarship fund in Veronica's name, full ride to university for young women from Milford pursuing journalism. Veronica had wanted to be a journalist. She'd been accepted to McGill's program. She never got to attend her first class. Harriet Drury retired for real this time, closed her blog, deleted her social media, moved to a cottage near Georgian Bay. But she called Liam every few weeks. They'd talk about the case, about life, about the weight of carrying other people's pain. I made mistakes in 1990, Harriet said during one call. I focused on Derek because he was the obvious suspect. I didn't push hard enough on Brian and Tyler and Joel because they came from good families. I let my assumptions guide the investigation. You were doing your job with the information you had, Liam said. That's what everyone says. But a girl died, and her killers walked free for 34 years because I didn't ask the right questions. Harriet was quiet for a moment. I'll carry that forever. It's appropriate that I do. Liam understood. He carried his own weight, the years he'd spent resenting Veronica for leaving. The times he'd told people his sister ran away, almost defensively, as if her choice reflected poorly on him. The anger at his parents that now mingled with understanding and grief. On what would have been Veronica's 53rd birthday, Liam visited her grave. The headstone was simple. Her name, her dates, and a line from a poem she'd written in high school. I was here, and I mattered. He brought irises, sat on the grass beside the stone, told his sister about his daughter's soccer team, about the scholarship fund, about the weather. Normal things. The kind of conversation they might have had if she'd lived. I don't know if you can hear me, Liam said. I don't know if there's anything after. But if there is, I hope you know we found the truth. I hope you know you weren't forgotten. I hope you know that what happened to you wasn't your fault. Wasn't because of anything you did or didn't do. You went to prom. That's all.
You were 18, and you wore a blue dress, and you went to prom. That should have been a happy memory, not the last night of your life. The wind moved through the cemetery trees. Somewhere a bird sang. Life continuing, indifferent and beautiful and cruel. Liam stood to leave, noticed someone standing near the cemetery gate. A woman in her 60s, watching. She approached slowly. I'm Cynthia Wright, she said. I don't know if you remember, I gave a statement about seeing Derek that night. I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I'm sorry I didn't speak up in 1990 about other things I saw and heard. What other things? Brian and his friends. The way they treated girls. The comments, the touching, the cruelty disguised as jokes. Cynthia looked at Veronica's grave. We all knew. All of us girls knew which boys to avoid. We whispered warnings to each other. Stay away from Brian. Don't be alone with the hockey team. But we didn't tell adults because we thought we wouldn't be believed. And I guess we were right, because when something finally did happen, the boys got away with it for 34 years. It's not your fault, Liam said. I know, but it's not my fault either. None of us who stayed silent are innocent. Cynthia placed flowers beside Liam's, roses this time, yellow. I have a daughter now. She's in university, and I've told her everything about Veronica, about what happens when we protect predators because they're popular or talented or from good families. I've told her to speak up, to report, to make noise. Maybe that's not enough, but it's something. They stood together by Veronica's grave, two people connected by a girl they'd both known and failed in different ways. She mattered, Cynthia said finally. That's what her headstone says. She mattered. Past tense. But I think she still matters. Present tense. The case changed things in Milford. The school has better policies now. The police take assault reports more seriously. The town talks about consent and accountability. It's slow change, but it's change. Because of her. After Cynthia left, Liam sat by the grave a while longer, thought about legacy and justice and the long arc of truth. His sister had been dead for 34 years. She'd missed her entire adult life, but her story had finally been told completely, honestly, without the lies that had smothered it. The tin his mother had saved, hidden behind Christmas ornaments for decades, that had been the key. A confession too dangerous to speak aloud, preserved in silence until someone found it. Liam had found it. And in finding it, he'd found his sister.
Not the sister who ran away to start a new life. Not the sister who died by her own hand in shame and despair, but the real Veronica. The girl who loved irises and wrote poetry and wanted to be a journalist. The girl who went to prom in a blue dress.
The girl who said no and was killed for it. The girl who mattered. Liam touched the headstone one more time, then walked back to his car. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cemetery. Behind him, Veronica's grave settled into the peaceful quiet of late summer. Ahead of him, life waited, complicated and painful, and worth living. He'd carry his sister's story with him. He'd tell it when it needed to be told. He'd make sure she wasn't forgotten. That's what you did for the people you loved. You remembered them. You honored their truth. You made sure the world knew they were here. And they mattered.